Welcome back. This is Dr. Jin Sung, and today we're going to continue on the topic of fatigue. We're going to talk about brain function and the activation of the brain. So we talked a lot about delivery of fuel, oxygen, glucose, and all the things that we need to ward off fatigue. Today we're going to just talk about basically the brain. It doesn't matter how many vitamins or supplements you take. If you don't activate the brain, it will not improve the plasticity and it will not improve function. So let's say I take a vitamin, right, that's supposed to be good for me and it helps with one specific symptom that I have. However, if you do not exercise the brain, your brain will not develop and connect for optimal function. So a lot of people don't realize that the brain has a lot to do with metabolic rate and fatigue. So there's issues if you have brain neurodegeneration or in terms of connectivity like ADD and ADHD in the younger kids, that you can have fatigue as a result of it. So let's just go ahead and recap just your basic function of what the brain does, right? So if you look at the frontal lobe, which is in the front there, it's for restraint, right? It's for impulse control. So it's your executive decision-making centers. It helps you make the right decisions. It decreases or inhibits your primal feelings, right? Your urges, right? So emotional control, planning, decision-making, motivation. When people lose motivation and they lose interest in hobbies, their frontal lobe may be being depressed or suppressed. Initiating and finishing tasks. So like you maybe want to start a project and you'll get to it and you'll get to it. And then when you finally get to it, you have a hard time finishing. You'll do a few things and you don't finish. So it's a big problem in terms of decision, planning, mental fatigue, and those types of things. Sometimes it's also involved in motor control. So if you have like heaviness in your hands and arms and legs, it can be an issue with the frontal lobe. Also with the speech, fluidity of speech. There's an area called the Broca's area, and it's the motor aspect of speech. So if you have speech problems or you have difficulty in terms of articulating yourself, it can be a problem in the frontal lobe. So the frontal lobe is right next to the parietal lobe. And the parietal lobe has this somatosensory area, right? It's responsible for left and right, right? So you might have left and right confusion if you have deficits there. You might have difficulty with math calculations, finding words, difficulty reading maps, right? So it can be a problem in the parietal lobe. And also there's like something called a homuncular map there. It's a strip in the brain that represents your entire body. So a lot of the sensations will go into the parietal lobe and feed forward into the motor aspects of the frontal lobe. The temporal lobe is responsible for things like hearing, interpretation of speech, localizing the sounds, memory, addresses and locations. All can be related to temporal lobe deficits. The occipital lobe, which is really in the back, is for discrimination of colors. You might see floaters in your eyes, or the colors don't look as vibrant, it becomes dull. So we're looking at different lobes of the brain, and they all need to talk to each other. They have connectivity to each other, because if you feel something, let's say on your arm, which is the parietal lobe, and let's say it's hot or it's painful, if you feel it, the motor aspect of it needs to be activated, right? So you pull away from it. So everything is interrelated and interconnected, right? The other part of the brain, which people don't think about in terms of lobes, is the cerebellum. The cerebellum is very important for things like movement, balance, clumsiness. If you have issues with clumsiness in your hands, you can get nausea and car sickness. Crowded places causes anxiety. This is all, it can all be related to cerebellum. So one of the best ways to activate the brain is through proprioception, movement, right? If you just got up and started moving, right, whether it's walking, lifting light weights, as you start to get better, you do yoga, Pilates, weight training, balance exercises. All these things can improve connectivity in the brain. Why? Because balance, which is cerebellar and your vestibular system, will feed forward up to the frontal lobe, right? So it also goes through the midbrain. So it stimulates the entire spectrum of the brain. So you have to be able to stimulate the brain through some sort of movement or stimulus, right? That's one of the best ways. As you start to advance, you may do more specific exercises, right? Things like eye movements, balance exercises, right? Playing games like Sudoku, playing chess. These are all cerebral activities that can improve connection, right? I'll give you the example of, let's say, a bodybuilder or want to be bodybuilder, right? Eats a lot of protein, whey protein, chicken breast. They're eating protein all the time. Yet, if they do not exercise, the muscle will never grow, right? Think about that. If your brain is not exercised, it will not grow or connect. So as we get older, yeah, we're going to have degeneration to a certain extent. We're going to have cell death. However, if you can improve the connectivity between cells in the brain, then you will function better. And the only way to improve the connectivity is through exercise, right? Movement, proprioception, Tai Chi, all these things. Anything that can stimulate the brain can create plasticity. Now, if you, let's say, do something and you're completely wiped out, let's say some people will drive and they fall asleep, the brain cannot handle the stimulus. Then you may need more specific exercises related to functional neurology, where we have to build your endurance to the brain, to the stimulus. So it might be simple exercises like arm movements, eye movements, maybe spinning to your left, to help balance more specific areas of the brain rather than just the entire brain. So if you have fatigue related to, let's say, I read, I fall asleep. I used to read a whole novel in a day, but I could only get through like half a chapter before I need a nap. That is a sign of neurodegeneration. It's a sign of early onset of things like maybe Alzheimer's or dementia, right? If you're losing your way, your direction is no good, that's an early sign, right? If you make poor decisions, right? You do things that you should not be doing, or you do things that are inappropriate, your frontal lobe is starting to decline, and your primal things that should be inhibited are coming out. You're doing things that you should not be doing, right? If you look at all the tragedies that are occurring across the United States and the world, where things happen on impulse, right? You think about the bad brains out there, right? They could not tell themselves what is good and what is bad, and I'm going to do something really bad. If they had a good frontal lobe, a good part of the brain in the front, that would have stopped them saying, hey, wait a minute, this is crazy. I should not be doing these types of things, right? It's very important to develop the brain. Your brain is what makes you human. It has the ability to control impulses, to control and make a society, right? We need proper activation of the brain. And you have to do it through certain exercises. And you can start with simple ones, right? Just movement, right? Being able to do a push-up, a squat, whatever it is, movement. But if you do certain things and you get tired and your brain just kapoots, then you may need a functional neurology workup where we can build up your endurance, give you certain nutrients that will help the brain endurance, right? and address those things that we need to address. Your blood sugar, anemia, gut issues, liver and gallbladder, sugar delivery, all those types of things. But in essence, we have to be able to stimulate the brain for it to connect. Hope that makes sense. So if you have fatigue, think brain, not just I have to take a vitamin or I just need more sleep. Your brain may not be functioning at its optimal, therefore making you fatigued. All right? My name is Dr. Jin Sung, where clinical excellence meets excellent results, and we'll see you guys next week on the healthy side. And if you have any questions, post below, and we'll go ahead and try to answer that for you. Otherwise, we'll see you next Tuesday at 12:30. Have an awesome day.